Hi everyone, welcome back to this YouTube channel called as Unacademy UPSC Articulate YouTube channel. This is Nishana Jumuddin, your educator in Academy. So today in this Fundamentals of Economy in just 30 minutes, we have another interesting topic of the day. It deals with fiscal policy again. So for the past few days, we have been talking about the fiscal policy in detail and the various subheadings based on the so-called broad concept fiscal policy. Today, we'll be quickly having a look into the different types of fiscal policy. That is, what is expansionary fiscal policy, what is contractionary fiscal policy, what is neutral fiscal policy, followed by the important components which you should know when you study about this fiscal policy or the policy that deals with taxation or public expenditure of the government, followed by what are the other important components of spending that comes under the so-called fiscal policy. This is what you will be studying in today's class. So I hope everybody is doing good and safe, and all the series that we have been doing over these few weeks is really benefiting you people. So any doubts, queries, whatever you have, feel free to get in touch with me via the Unacademy profile as well as Telegram channel. So now a quick look into the schedule of my sessions. If you see, for the month of June, every day 7 to 7:30 p.m. we'll be having this basics of economy class. Then after that 8 to 8:10 p.m. in the same YouTube channel for 10 minutes economy booster series. Let's say all the important trending economy topics will be covered. And also in the Plus platform 2 p.m. currently Prelim Sampurna 1200 MCQ series going on. And also in the next month, that is by July 14th, another NCERT new batch is starting. Okay. So exclusively NCERT economy chapters will be discussed. For you to be a part of this, you can use the code NISHA IAS Live. Be it free class or plus class, just click the link given in the description box, guys, which will take you to my Unacademy profile. There you can find plus and free class link. Use the code NISHA IAS Live and get maximum discounts. So now back to the topic of discussion regarding the important concepts of fiscal policy as to the types, or let's say the different components. So here we go. So now, as we all know, like the monetary policy, even your fiscal policy or the policy of the government of India do have different types. One is expansionary, another is contractionary. And these two are quite common. And now there is something called as neutral as such. Okay, so let's have a quick look into each of these in detail. Now, what is expansion? Expansion always deals with the growth of the economy. How can you actually grow your economy? And contraction means how can you decrease the growth? But then nobody thinks of decreasing growth. But then there are certain situations where you have to do that as well, right? So let's quickly have a look into what it is all about. So now, expansionary fiscal policy is a policy where in order to increase the growth of the economy, the government will start spending more and more. The expenditure of the government will be more, whereas the taxes will be cut down. So government expenditure will increase, whereas the taxes will come down. So that is a situation of expansionary fiscal policy. What about contractionary? The opposite. The expenditure of the government or spending will come down and the taxes will go up, the rates. That's called as contractionary fiscal policy to limit the growth of economy in some few selected situations. So to make it more simplified, I can tell you that the concept expansionary fiscal policy, basically it is used for what? Giving a boost or a kick start to the economy. Just that you want to speed up what? The rate of economic growth, especially during a bad phase of the economy. Let's take the case of COVID-19 pandemic. What happened, guys? Our economy was actually entering in a situation of recession. Don't you think so? What is recession? Slowing down of economic activities. So now in such kind of situations, we need to actually boost up the economy, right? To maintain the living standards and to ensure that the people are not going in poverty and all. So you have to use an expansionary fiscal policy. How can you do that? Simple. The government has to increase their spending, because that is indeed very important to boost the economic growth, and also they have to go for a tax cut. This is how they can go for expansionary fiscal policy. But then do you think this is really a kind of sustainable policy? Definitely no. This is not a sustainable policy, because when you keep doing this, spending means more and more money is required. And when you're cutting the tax, the revenue the government gets through taxation, be it direct or indirect, is reduced. So what will the government do? It will lead to another perspective called as fiscal deficit. Don't you think so? Yes, it will lead, no doubt in that. So that is, the revenue is greater but the expenditure is the revenue is less but the expenditure is too much over and above the revenue. So automatically it will lead to budget deficit, and it should be used with caution by the government. Such kind of expansionary fiscal policy only in situations like unexpected emergencies. We can take the example of COVID-19 pandemic. You can actually resort to such kind of expansionary fiscal policy, I can say. Now, talking about the next one, that is contractual fiscal policy. If you know what is expansionary, then you should be able to understand contractionary fiscal policy in an easy manner. The opposite of that. If expansionary fiscal policy talks about, let's say, reducing the taxes, here it is the opposite. You're going to increase the taxes. And if you saw that is expansionary is about increasing government expenditure, in contractionary, you are reducing the government spending. The ulta it is. So now, the government spending is less than the tax revenue. So that the revenue is more and the spending is less. But then, in reality, do you think this will happen? It's very rare, because always the revenue is less and the expenditure happens to be more, right? That's actually how it works. So now such kind of contractual fiscal policy, what do? They cut upon the total, or I can tell you the aggregate demand in the economy. So now the growth of the economy actually lead to what? A reduction in the inflationary pressures or the rise in price in the economy. That is what the contractual fiscal policy actually does in the economy. Clear? Now, third category or the type of fiscal policy is neutral fiscal policy. Neutral is what? Neither expansionary, neither contractionary. Something in the between, or let's say in the middle, right? So it implies a balanced budget where whatever revenue the government is getting through taxation, okay, that is equal to the government expenditure. That is, that taxation or the revenue what the government is getting is sufficient, or it is enough to meet the expenditure activities, I can say. It's a kind of balanced budget. But do you think such kind of stuffs can happen? Come on, it is again a question mark. If that is the case, then our country, India, would have been doing great. Even the developed countries cannot have a balanced budget many a times. There are few fluctuations. It will really happen. That is there. But you can kind of manage it without, going into deficit and all in the context of developed economies and all. Now, in the context of India, if you see, a balanced budget is quite, a difficult task. So thus, to make it more simplified, I can tell you that a neutral fiscal policy, it further means that the government spending is fully funded. How? Through the tax revenue or the revenue that they get through indirect or direct taxes. And the overall budget outcome, it has what? A kind of neutral or let's say balanced effect on the level of economic activity. So the key word, balanced budget, that is equal to what? Neutral fiscal policy, when the spending is equal to the tax revenue that the government is getting. Simple as that. So these are the three different types of fiscal policy which you should keep in mind. For your prelims perspective, connecting with the current affairs, so-called terms can be used. So have a quick look into it. This is enough with regard to this topic. I think already in one of the class of fiscal policy, we have done regarding expansionary and contractionary, if I'm not wrong. I have mentioned about it. So you can even refer to those classes. Now, the next important topic of today's class is the components of fiscal policy. Now, it's very important to know what are the important components or tools or instruments of fiscal policy. Don't you think so? One is taxation policy. Now, the government get all the revenue. How? When they impose taxes, it could be either direct tax, the tax which is coming from income tax or wealth tax or property tax or whatever it is. Whereas indirect means today it is equal to goods and service tax or GST. Either source, whatever it is. When the government is getting a revenue, chalo, that comes under the taxation policy. And it is very important for the government as well. Don't you think so? To have a revenue? Yes. Only then the expenditure activity can go on. And at the same time, just like that, the government cannot fix a rate of taxation, be it direct or indirect. They have to follow a judicious taxation policy and make sure that whatever rates of taxation they are fixing, they should be rational and correct because of two reasons. For example, if the government is increasing taxation the way they want, automatically too much of tax means you and me as consumers or as a general public, do you think we will have more money in our hand? Definitely no. The purchasing capacity or the power of people decreases. Automatically, when people does not buy more, the demand is decreasing. So now what happened to the producers? They cannot supply more. Even if there is a commodity also, it becomes vain because nobody is going to purchase it. So automatically, slowly the production, investments, everything will decrease. And what about lower taxes? So sometimes, for example, the government is not even taxing to the required level. Automatically, people are left with more and more money. Their purchasing power or capacity increases, leading to high levels of spending. So people will start spending more and more and money on whatever goods they want because they do have a lot of money with them. So now what happens? Slowly the price of the commodities will start shooting up. So no matter you have money in your hand also, too much of money will start chasing too few goods. What is the meaning of that? Inflation. So again, your RBI is coming. So fiscal policies in the context of Government of India. Now because of this scenario, now slowly the monetary policy is coming up, wherein the Reserve Bank of India, they'll start implementing the tools or instruments to control the inflations like your repo rate, reverse repo rate, cash reserve ratio, SLR, open market operations, etc., etc. So you can connect this process, guys. of fiscal policy with monetary policy. Actually, everything is connected in economics. When you study one only, you will get to know how the other is connected. Take care. I hope this interlinking and connection is also clear to you people. The next important component, like taxation policy of your fiscal policy, is expenditure policy, the spending policy of government. Now this consists of revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. That is, out of the revenue, what do you get, what is expenditure you are doing, and the same applies to capital as well. So basically we know that the budget of government, they are very important instrument embedding the expenditure policy of government, right? How they are going to spend on various activities. The activities could be welfare activity, infrastructure activities, subsidies, anything. And also the budget is used for what? Deficit financing. Deficit financing means when there is a gap of revenue and which is unable to meet the expenditure, they'll resort to printing of more currency, which is done by the RBI, because that is filling the gap between the income the government is getting and the spending they are doing. So these two things are used by the government in the context of what? Expenditure policy. Either they will borrow to finance the expenditure, or they will resort to deficit financing, that is printing of currency by RBI. The next important component of fiscal policy is investment and disinvestment policy. Now, maximum or optimum level of domestic, that is within the country, as well as foreign investment. Don't you think so? It's very important for maintaining economic growth. Yes, people think that FDI, that is foreign direct investment, is only required. It's not the case. Even the domestic level of investment is also important if you want to have a stable economic growth. But in that, FDI is quite important, that I can tell you. Because FDI will, more and more FDI means more and more investments, more and more multinational companies will come up, more and more people get employment opportunities. As far as the country India is concerned, automatically we are able to increase our economic activity to a greater extent. That is why always FDI has been said. And a load of current affairs in the context of FDI is what? It is said that 100% FDI should be maintained via the automatic or the government route. A lot of restrictions were put up recently in the current affairs context, right? And India is a country where we are really doing great in the context of FDI, because it has been increasing over the years, and we are in the top 11th position to be the attractive FDI destinations in the globe. Previously we were in the top 10th position, but now we have slipped one position ahead. But that's okay, but still we are able to attract. And if you see out of the sectors, as far as the current affairs of the May 2021 is concerned, I can tell you that the sector that attracted more amount of FDI for our country, India, is software. Software and IT, which comes under the third sector of the economy, that is the tertiary or the service sector. Okay, so all these current affairs also you can just start interlinking, because I've taught you all this in the previous series and also in the Unacademy free class and plus class when I was doing MCQs. Those who follow me regularly will know this. Anyways, the next important topic to be discussed, or the policy components of fiscal policy, is debt and surplus management. For example, what is this debt and surplus management? Now, for example, the government is getting more revenue, take care, than what they are spending. It is called as surplus. And now the government spends more than the income they call, it's called as deficit. Now, to fund this deficit or gap, what will the government do? They have to resort to borrowing, either from within the country or outside the country. Sometimes they can even borrow from what? The RBI. But RBI also has a limit, so they'll start resorting to printing the currency, called as deficit financing. This is how the debt or the surplus amount has been managed in our country, guys, by the government. Clear? So now, moving on to the last topic of discussion, that is components of spending under fiscal policy or expenditure. One is, see, whatever revenue the government is getting, what do? Do you think they only keep on spending on infrastructure project or welfare or subsidies? No. You have a load of government staffs or people recruited in various government services. Don't you think so? You have to give staffs salaries for these staffs. From where does it go? From the government fund. So now the components of spending of government, point number one, include maintenance, including the salaries given to staff. So now this cannot be changed or altered in the short run, and hence it is hardly a part of policy making. But then in the long run, through the VRS and reducing new jobs in public sector or vice versa, this expenditure can be altered. That is, you can, if you want to reduce expenditure on the government perspective, means in the long run you can reduce the opportunities in public and increase the more in the private sector. So the kind of expenditure of government is decreased. But then nobody does that, because everybody wants to get a job in the government perspective, because that is having a surety or a job security. And most importantly, they come under the formal sector of the economy. Right? Because everybody wants to get a job in the formal sector now. Even you are all studying for the UPSC civil service. Do you think you will get a job in the informal sector? Definitely no. You also want to be in the formal sector now. Simple logic. Anyway, the next one, loan repayments. That is out of the revenue the government gets through fiscal policy, that's taxation. They have to spend. Now, too much of borrowing means the government is liable to pay to the people from whom they borrowed. So, interest payment is also a kind of liability, and loan payment is also a kind of liability, which has to go from the government's hand. That's also an expenditure, right? Now, in the context of this competitive spending of fiscal policy, in the context of loan payment, in short term, you cannot do anything. Whereas in long run, you can reduce, the government can reduce its payments or eliminate them. How, guys? By running the surplus budget. That is, earning more income and incurring less expenditure. Next is subsidy. Very, very important to be noted. Out of the spendings of government, I can tell you, it is a major part of the fiscal policy as the expenditure perspective, because you can alter in the short run, but unfortunately, I can tell you subsidies as policy instrument, have been abused in India. That is also true. And these are basically used by all the politicians as a poll promise. In the time of elections, okay, we'll give you fertilizer subsidy, food subsidy, that subsidy, this subsidy. So automatically, all the people in rural area, they tend to get attracted and then they fall for that. Right? In recently, if you see, the recent example of Aam Aadmi Party manifesto is a good example. How subsidy should not be used. This is one political party where they said, let's not use subsidy as a tool to loot people, or let's say change their mind frame just for the sake of getting the vote. So that's something which you can quote an example. Recently, the Delhi government party, they said this, and in place of these, I can tell you subsidies for health program, renewable energy, public transport shall be increased, so that you can ensure a very good health and sustainable growth. So this is what actually you should do, instead of saying you will give that subsidy to the public. Now, welfare scheme. Now we know that welfare scheme is something which is unavoidable, right? And these are one of the policy options that once introduced, you cannot even think of removing it because of their popularity nature. That is there. You cannot say this welfare scheme is no more available. That's not possible. So this expenditure has to be continuously incurred by the government. It is recurring in nature. Similarly, if you see most of the cases, there are necessary two and important instruments of social welfare and economic growth. Now, many a times there will be unnecessary instruments also, but still, since it's coming under welfare, you cannot take it like that. Now, in the context of implementation, I can tell you which is the most important part of a scheme was concerned. They generally suffer from poor implementation and lot of corruptions. Let me give an example to you. Now, what is PDS? Public Distribution System. It is a welfare scheme only, basically to help the poor people. Don't you think so? Yes. So now, can you tell me that this PDS is conducted in a 100% corrupt-free manner? Definitely no. Lot of loopholes, lot of corruptions, kallatram, sab kuch is on the rise, I can tell you. Right? So thus, despite being meritorious expenditure in nature, these at times appears as waste as well. Because in the context of welfare scheme, a lot of fraudery, lot of corruptions, lot of loopholes, kallatram, all these things are on the rise. Because let's say for example, the government has allotted 100 crore for one particular welfare scheme. But out of that 50 crore may be spent, or let's say 60 may be spent, the remaining 40 will go into the pockets of the so-called people. So what happens automatically again? The complete agenda or target is being lagged out. Now, the next important component of spending by the government is sometimes the government has to incur some expenditure which are in the context of wasteful nature, called as wasteful expenses. So that is these kind of expenses, I should tell you that with immediate effect it should be curbed or cut off. And however, no government in the world has neither shown the intention to curb them, though their efforts reduce them from time to time under public pressure. That is true. For example, full page at government advertisement newspaper to generate favorable public opinion. All these things are wasteful expenses. This is not going to give you any sort of popularity, publicity as such. Just that it's showing the people that the so-called government who is in power is having some credibility. But apart from that, you can utilize that money for some other activity which will actually fill the stomach of a person who is in hunger. Because as far as the country India is concerned, we all know that what is happening, right? So you can actually think in that perspective. So reduce all these wasteful expenses. That's another important point to be understood under the components of spending or expenditure fiscal policy by the government. Now, similarly, there are few components of earning also. You know how they earn it? When you talk about components of spending, you should learn about components of earning also. What are they? Tax single. See, single most important source on government revenue is also very important policy. Don't you think so? That is, taxation is only source of revenue for the government, so you have to make sure that you are maintaining that. Next is borrowing. So in the kind of deficit situation or another kind of situation, you have to resort to borrowing because it is a necessary source of fund. Though it is not a desirable one also, it is important. And as far as the country India is concerned, in a developing economy, the tax GDP ratio is low. Why? due to less per capita income. Thus, it becomes an important part of monetary policy as well, like a fiscal policy, to have a proper impact in the context of what interest rate, credit creation, this money creation, also overall money supply. And from the sale and lease of assets, proceeds from that is also kind of earnings, guys, for the government, because this is both one time and a regular source of income and can relief. For example, the government is lending, the lending government buildings for private use, then other assets like a telecom spectrum, or let's say lease of a 9 block for certain years. All these things will regularly fetch income for whom, guys? The government. Whereas, for example, if you are selling a public sector undertaking, then that's a one-time income. It's not regular. When you lend a building for a private use, the government building, and monthly you're getting an income or rent out of it. But when you sell something, it's one time. Thus, however, there are these are, however, good source of revenue for the government, because they are providing the government more room to spend without increasing taxes. See, one simple logic: let the government keep on spending, that is okay, but then they should have a source for it, that is taxation. So now, just because they do not have a source called taxation, they cannot increase the spending also. So these kind of activities will enable the government to actually increase the spending, because they are not increasing taxes now. So the people are not affected, or the public is not affected. That is the whole logic under the context called as components of earnings of fiscal policy. Clear? And profits from PSU, that is also there. That is also a source of revenue for government. Now, don't you think so? Apart from taxation, this is also kind of revenue, because a lot of public sector enterprises or undertakings, they will generate losses. So automatically, what will the government do? Simple, they'll end up subsidizing them. And these days, all these public sector undertakings, they come under the context called as triple P. That is public-private partnership, I can tell you. So you can just go through, all these things. For example, if you see as the, Control Order General Report, they are saying that Indian Airlines, they were deliberately kept in losses by avoiding flights on profitable routes. Why? Because the private airlines had to benefit during the UPA government rule. There are few examples that's popping up. And these days, more than the government airlines, the private airlines is a good market. Your Indigo and Air India, you can have a good comparison. So we are done for the day, my young officers. So here we go. A quick look into the types, then the components of fiscal policy with regard to that revenue, with regard to spending, and also the other perspective we saw. So it's time for us to test what we studied. Here we go. Which of the following measures are examples of expansion fiscal policy? Quickly give the answer. Decrease in tax, increase in pension, increase in unemployment compensation, increase in tax. Look at these options, very tricky options. Indeed, very interesting also. Applying the technique of keyword elimination comparison, which I have taught you for the 6 p.m. Unacademy class. What is a keyword? Correct. Next is example of expansionary fiscal policy. Expansion means growth. So more of spending. So what you will do? The first and the fourth option is highly connected. Don't you think so? Yes, it is. Very well, we got to know that only either one can be correct. If you say decrease is correct, then increase has to be eliminated. So use your brains. Definitely the answer cannot be all the above. It has to be only either one. Through this you got to know that through the comparison technique, then the second and third is correct. Because out of 1 and 4 you have to make a choice. And the answer is what? It is option number C. 1, 2, 3. That is decreasing tax rate, increasing pensions, increase in unemployment compensation. They are the examples of expansion fiscal policy. Expansion means rates have to be cut and expenditure has to increase. Simple logic. Clear? And increasing the tax rate, they are not an example of expansion fiscal policy, rather contraction fiscal policy, I can say. The next one, if you see in the year 2018 on the prelims examination, you had a question, guys, in the prelims. Counter-cyclical fiscal policy becomes critical during an economic crisis. Second, it is one wherein fiscal policy reinforces the business cycle by being expansionary during good times and contractionary during recessions. 3. Pro-cyclical fiscal policy stabilizes the business cycle by being contractionary in good times and expansionary during recessions. Think and give the right answer. Which one do you think could be correct? And the answer is option number A, which means that only the first one is correct, whereas the second and third one is absolutely galat. So now actually option number D was 1, 2, 3, I forgot to tell you. So thus if you see this counter-cyclical fiscal policy, they said that expansion is during good time and contraction is during recessions. That's what they said, right? And it is a kind of fiscal policy which reinforces business cycle, they said. And third one, they are stabilizing the business cycle. So let me tell you why the answer is only A. If you see, a kind of cyclical fiscal policy means your kind of cyclical is something which is on their normal routine. But counter cyclical fiscal policy, it's very important to smooth out economic cycles, and they become very, very important for what? During the recession, or let's say economic crisis, to bring back the stability of the economy. So that is why the answer is only A. And now, what is the importance of this counter cyclical fiscal policy? If you see Indian kings, okay, during those days, even they used to build palaces during famines and droughts. Why? Because they want to provide employment and improve the economic fortunes of the private sector. And economic theory, when you talk about the same context, I can tell you that in a recessionary year, the government must spend more because the economic activities are coming down than what they do in the expansionary time. See, normally in the expansionary time only government will want to spend more, but then it is said that when there is a recession or something, definitely the government should spend more than what they do in the expansionary time. So such a kind of counter cyclical fiscal policy, they'll help you in stabilizing what the business cycle, and they can do that by being contractionary in good times and expansionary in bad times. In your question, I gave you the ulta. That is contractionary in good times and expansionary during the recession. It is the opposite. That is, they have to be what? They have to be contractionary in good and expansionary in bad times. Clear? Now, what about pro-cyclical fiscal policy? You studied about the counter-cyclical one. So, pro-cyclical fiscal policy means they are the one in which the fiscal policy will start reinforcing the business cycle, and they'll be very good during expansionary policy time and contraction during recessions. It's the opposite. If cyclical is talking about, let's say, contractionary in good and expansionary in bad, it will be the pro will be the opposite. Clear? But here we are saying that the counter-cyclical means they want to be contractionary in good and expansionary in bad times. Pro means the opposite, contractionary in bad and expansionary in good times. Simple logic. Now, if you see in the year 2018, there was an important question, guys, based on the fiscal policy spending now, because if you have a look into the fiscal policy components of spending and earning, automatically to rectify the situation, the RBI will come in, where they will start using the monetary policy, I can tell you, right? So now in that particular context, a question in 2018 came regarding RBI's expansionary monetary policy. Discuss in detail regarding that. So you can just write your answers based on that and submit in the channel, okay, Telegram channel. So thank you so much, my officers. I hope you really enjoyed the session and a crystal clear understanding of fiscal policy has popped up in your brains. So now, to follow me for more courses, in the description box of this particular video, you have my Unacademy profile link and also my code Nisha IAS Live to unlock the free class and also to get a 10% discount in the Plus subscription. Very, very important. Clear? To avail all the quality courses. And if you do like this video, do not forget to like, share and also put your valuable feedbacks in the comment box. There is also UPSC Maha subscription offer going on. Let's say, for example, today, that is June 23rd. If you're subscribing till next year, 23rd June 2022, you have an offer. But then they've extended till mains, which means that you are getting double the offer from Unacademy to study. And you can even have a loan facility, so don't miss this opportunity. Apply my code Nisha IAS Live and make sure that you're making a preparation more simplified with 1 year, 2 year batches and also with NCRT batches from the scratch. So everything has been simplified in Unacademy. So any doubt, queries, feel free to get in touch with me. Clear? So thank you so much, my officers. So see you tomorrow with another set of interesting topic, and once again reminding you to share, like, subscribe and also comment, put your valuable feedbacks in the comment box. Thank you and Jai Hind.